Again, welcome. Economist, as I was saying, is a nonprofit based in Tucson, Arizona, and we serve teachers. Our mission is to strengthen economic education at the secondary level so that all students can use principles of economic thinking in their personal, professional, and civic lives. And we do that by offering instructional resources, lesson plans, for example, and offering professional development programs like the one you're at today, or at least starting today. And so thank you for joining us for that. All of the resources we provide are and always will be free, at no monetary cost, and a free the four-letter F word we try not to use with our students. Um, and additionally, if you are teaching and working in middle school, high school, college, you can become an Econoful member by filling out a short form on our website, and that makes you eligible for giveaways and other incentives on top of the professional development and instructional resources that we have available. And we'd love for you to join us. Our goal today in this relatively short meeting, we have two objectives. So I'll give you a moment to quickly scan over what those are. So if we're successful today, when you leave, you should have a pretty good sense of how the book club works, and also have a little context so that when you dive into reading AI economics, you're not surprised. You have an idea of what concepts and questions we're going to be exploring over the next several weeks. So I want to just tell you a little bit about what we're aspiring to by offering this book club. So, the organization that funds Econoful, the Thomas R. Brown Foundation, has been supporting an economics book club for teachers for more than 15 years now. And in the last few years, we've offered it online as we're doing here. But our purpose has remained the same over all those years. We hope that the program provides an opportunity for you to deepen and strengthen your economics content knowledge. The research suggests that many of us teaching economics at the high school level in particular are often voluntold that they're teaching economics and haven't taken very many economics courses, for example, as an undergraduate. So there's a lot of room for us to expand our content knowledge, and that helps make us more confident in the classroom and able to answer those questions that students inevitably ask us. We also see the book club as an opportunity to share supplemental resources with all of you. That includes lesson plans, podcasts, videos, other audiovisual resources that you can use in your classroom. And so you'll be interacting with a lot of those in the program too. And together, we think these will help strengthen economic education in secondary classrooms, which of course is very well aligned with our mission as an organization. So if these are things that you are interested in participating in, you are absolutely in the right place. So to start with, a little bit in the way of logistics. The first step for the book club is you need to get your copy of the book in whatever format you prefer. And I've highlighted in green here the most cost-effective options available to you. So you might check to see if your local library has the title. If you have a paid subscription to Spotify, the audio book is available to you, and fittingly, it is a digital voice that it is read by. Ebooks are often a little less expensive than the physical copy, but any major bookseller will have this book available to you. So if you haven't gotten your book yet, don't panic. You are not behind. You're going to be able to finish the program. You just want to get it soon so you can get started with the reading. So we have about 7 weeks over which you'll read the book and interact with some Nearpod modules that I'm going to tell you about now. So the heart of the program are these self-paced lessons that will be sent out to you over the course of, again, about 7 weeks, which with the first one being sent out to you today, and then the next one in 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks after that. And I'll be in communication with all of you regularly over this time frame with reminders, and also just as an encouragement for you to ask any questions that you might have. So each module is attached to a particular portion of the book. And the goal is that you finish all of them by Sunday, July 26th. So even if that means you do all of the lessons on, Saturday, July 25th, that's up to you. We want you to make it work for your schedule. Um, we'll send them out every 2 weeks. The goal is that they're done by Sunday, July 26th. What you'll be doing in these modules, if you've never participated in a book club with us before, are these three key pieces. You'll have an opportunity to review the relevant portion of the book. So you'll see some pull quotes. You'll hear a little bit in the way of a summary of each individual chapter. And then we'll explore supplemental resources that connect to that part of the book. So, for example, in Module 1, I'm going to share with you a lesson plan about AI and the future of work designed for a high school classroom. And you will also ask you to share your perspective, your thoughts, your opinions about what you're reading and how it might connect to what you're doing in the classroom with students, and also have opportunities for you to share resources that other members of the book club might also find valuable. If you're able to finish all three modules by the final date, July 26th, we'll send you a certificate of professional development that indicates 8 hours of professional development to account for your time completing the modules. So each module is intended to be completed in about 30 minutes, but also to account for some of your reading time. On top of that, if you are a US-based Economist member, we will also send you a $25 Amazon gift card to offset any money that you may have spent in acquiring your book. And if you were able to get it from your library, or you paid less than $25 for it, those are just bonus dollars for you, and a thank you to you for joining us. So I want to pause now and allow for any questions that you all might have about how the book club works. And we are a pretty large group today, so I would ask you just to put those in the chat. So again, I'll pause here for a moment. Happy to answer any questions you might have. Well, I think the best person to answer that is the author who's with us, and he's going to be speaking to us in just a moment. So, Craig, great question. I'm going to ask you to hold that thought just for one moment. So, right now, really just questions about the logistics, like how the book club works, what you can expect. It seems like we might not have questions about that now. I will stay on for a few minutes after the meeting today to answer any questions. And you, of course, can email me anytime. I'll put a link to my email address, or I'll put my email address in the chat at the end as well. So now let's transition to thinking about the title for this summer. You're going to find that it is very much connected to your personal, professional, and civic life. Just yesterday, the Wall Street Journal published this piece where they spoke with 16 economists about AI and the future of work and what their predictions are. And while the 16 economists agreed that AI will increase productivity, they disagree about a lot of other elements of what might be coming for us. And so these are the kinds of questions we're going to be wrestling with over the next several weeks with the help of Dr. Ben Shiller's book, AI Economics. So this book was published just a couple months ago. It's hot off the presses. Dr. Shiller is an associate professor of economics at Brandeis University in Massachusetts. His research focuses on the economics of digitization and how changes in technology are affecting all of us. He's taught a course called The Economics of Digitization. So I think we're in excellent hands as we start thinking maybe a little bit more deeply about what AI might mean for us, for our students, and the future more broadly. So we are very lucky, and we've been able to get our author, Dr. Shiller, to join us today. We always ask our authors, but we don't always get so lucky in them being able to participate. So we're in great luck today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can turn things over to Dr. Shiller and you can hear from the author what you might expect in the book ahead.
So thanks, Megan. Yeah, I'm excited to introduce my book to you today and tell you just a little bit about it, and then answer a couple questions later if you have them. So it's a book about how artificial intelligence will change many things, including our jobs, our cities, consumer markets, and our lives. And I think an important distinction, it's not necessarily the version that you'd get in the headlines. But I really try and make it the version that you get when you look at the evidence and try to think like an economist. So the key insight that connects chapters on many different topics is the what I call the incentive filter. The essential idea is that technology determines what is possible, but economics, and by that I mean incentives, costs, who pays and who profits, determines what actually happens. Let me show you what I mean with an example because I think once you see it, you can't unsee it. So consider the Segway scooter. Its inventor said in the year 2001 that it will be to the car what the car was to the horse and buggy. But priced at $5,000 with a range of 15 miles and a top speed of 12 miles per hour, it just didn't make sense for most people to buy for commuting, no matter how cool the technology was. And if the Segway shows the great technology stalling at the filter, air conditioning actually shows the reverse. It was invented initially to keep paper flat at a printing press, and then was transitioned to air conditioning, with the modest goal of keeping people comfortable. But incentives pointed it somewhere far bigger. It actually reshaped where Americans live and work, fueling the whole migration to the Sun Belt. And I think, an organization in Arizona would be a good example of that. So that's the lens that I use throughout the book to translate emerging technological capabilities into probable real world outcomes. I do want to say, before I tell you what's inside, I want to say what the book is not. Right? It's not a textbook, not that math heavy. Maybe there are two equations in the whole book, but they're both skippable. They're really not central. But through stories, it quietly teaches a number of the core ideas from economics. So things like the prisoner's dilemma, elasticities, externalities, adverse selection, moral hazard, and other topics like that. So you might ask, sort of more substantively, what is in it? Well, it runs across three big territories. There's work and education, which jobs vanish, which quietly get safer, and why AI might finally help teachers solve a problem that you've faced forever. How to teach one lesson to a room full of students who all learn differently. Right? There's markets, and this is where it gets a little bit strange at times. There's privacy conundrums, novel pricing strategies, a booming scam economy, and the ways that companies use technology to slip past laws that took a century to build. And this is where it gets a little scary, the biggest stakes of all, the risks that AI poses to society, including why it may be an existential threat to all of us, and strangely, why the economics suggests it might still be a risk worth taking anyway. So, that's the high level of the territory. You might wonder, who is it for? I think as of the intended audience as young adults who are interested in economics or AI, possibly to go on for a major in college. But my secret hope is that it actually reaches students who never saw economics as a path at all and shows them both how interesting the subject can be and how broadly its skill set can be applied. And wherever you start students, they don't have to read it cover to cover. I think that's really important. Each chapter mostly stands on its own. So you can mix, match, and reorder. Maybe you start with chapter 9 on pricing. They might skip back to chapter 2 on jobs. Basically, you can build a syllabus whatever order you want and pick and choose which chapters you actually want to include. Um, so, a quick word on why you might trust me. I don't usually like going over sort of, you know, things. I mean, my research has appeared in good places like The Economist, Financial Times, White House Policy Report. I always feel weird saying that. I think actually what matters a lot more for this book is the fact that I've been presenting or attending core conferences on the economics of technological change at the National Bureau of Economic Research and Stanford University. So it's not just sort of my thoughts or my guesses about where this is going. This is something that I've been thinking about for a long time and trying to sharpen my thinking. Um, the last thing that I want to mention is a thought about how this book reads, because I think that's really important. The core ideas of the book are actually largely based on academic research, 2 decades worth. But I worked very hard in the book to make sure that it doesn't read that way. The economics arrives through stories, like, for example, why Chinese officials once painted an entire mountainside green and why technology eventually made them stop, or why before long most books may be free, or why companies like Uber may someday soon charge you a higher price if your phone battery is running low. Okay. Um, so, you know, each one of these stories is fun on its own, but it's also an example of this bigger principle, the incentive filter, uh, you know, deciding which of the many possible outcomes actually arrives. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer questions. I just wanted to thank you. I'm often seeing your students in my classes when they get to college, and I also recognize that this is actually often challenging subject matter to convey to students. And I mean, I'm biased here. I'm an economics professor, but I think it's really important not only for their future jobs, but also just for their lives. Um, so great talking to you. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to answer other questions if you have them.
Yeah, we can maybe take a question or two from the chat if folks have them. In the meantime, I'll say that with the books we read in our book club, sometimes they're really just for the teacher to read, but sometimes they also are a good fit to use pieces of at least directly with students. So if you had to choose a chapter in your book that you think might be most relevant to a high school junior or senior, um, what might that be?
It's a good question. Chapters 2 and 3 focus on jobs, which I think is a topic that a lot of students are interested in. And it also illustrates some of the core concepts from economics, like the elasticity, and actually shows why it really matters. I think it's sometimes dry material. Um, yeah, I mean, I think those are perhaps the most relevant. There are some others later, like the pricing chapter can be interesting and illustrate some points. If you really want to interest your students and scare them, chapter 6 might be the one that does that best. That's
Chapter
sort of
six
on,
was tough,
yeah.
for sure. Um,
Um,
well, thank you. That's helpful. Certainly students, I think high school students have some anxiety about what the future holds in terms of work and what they might choose to study. So, thank you for that recommendation. Anna, I don't know if you can see how well you can see the chat at the moment, but Anna has a question in the chat about whether you see students using synthesis or Hey Gen.
so those are the video generation software. I haven't actually seen them using it yet. I mean, I think that it's where I see it going. I know a lot of my students have actually stopped coming to my office hours because they just chat with AI. And I don't know if you meant that they were using it for their own faces or trying to use it as like a tutor. But I do envision a day when those are used as sort of in place of office hours or extra help in some way, because I think that a lot of students have a preference for actually seeing a face rather than just seeing, you know, ChatGPT spitting out words. But I haven't actually encountered that on my own yet.
Gil asks about so he sees that there's a chapter about AI in education, and he wonders what role you see for the
Uh,
classroom teacher if AI becomes the personalized tutor for each student?
So that's a great question. So first, I want to say I think it says something about replacing a teacher. I definitely don't think it replaces a teacher. The One of the core ideas of the chapter is that it'd be great if we had more teachers, not less. And AI can kind of help fill in some of the gaps. But I think that there's a lot of things that AI can never do well. It's not great at motivating and kind of giving the real direction of why these things matter, not in an interesting way. And, um, it's not going to present the material necessarily for the first time. I do think that there's something about a teacher at the front of the classroom. Where it really excels is where students learn differently. So I had a student in actually a new class that I introduced. It's actually a freshman class where I'm encouraging them to write papers on how they'll use AI in their education and on their job and think about the implications of it. And one student noted that he was taking a math class. And he wasn't a math major. I think it was linear algebra, so it's a somewhat difficult class for college students. And he was struggling somewhat in the class. But what the AI really helped him with was teaching him in a different way. So he was really into sports. And so it was able to convey a lot of it using sports analogies. And he was never the type of student who was necessarily best taught through using the technical language, like the math, terms and the specific terminology. And so sort of use somewhat different terminology for him. And so I think when you have some of these learning differences across students, it can help fill in the gaps and kind of add the personalization that would be too costly to do otherwise, right? Like you're not going to teach each student on their own lesson. That's impossible. And so I think that's how AI really empowers you to kind of reach some of these students.
So I think we'll allow time for two more questions, if that's okay, Dr.
Mhm.
Schiller. So I don't, if you can see Craig's question, he's wondering where you would have weighed in on that question that the Wall Street Journal posed to economists.
Yeah, so it's a great question. The big question is what it's going to do overall, because I think there are going to be varied impacts across different professions. Um, a lot of my second chapter is actually about this, so I could go on for a long time about it. But I think that for a while, the net impact is going to be okay. There's been a lot of technological changes in the past that has eliminated or reduced the number employed in certain professions. And yet, I think if you look at it today, more people work as a fraction of the population than I think basically ever. Um, partly because now there's not these sort of gender restrictions, which were really unfortunate. But I think the point is that many jobs have been replaced and we have a lot of employment. So I'm pretty optimistic in the near term. You ask me 20, 30 years out, all bets are off, but that's sort of my general opinion.
And then the last question, AI is moving so fast. You published this book earlier this year, but your publishing timeline was quite condensed, as everyone will read in the book. Has
Yeah.
anything happened since it was published that you were surprised by, or maybe you wished you'd been able to write about in the book?
Yes. Gosh, I've already had a number of things that I'd like to add to the book because it's moving so fast. You'll read about it in the book. I was very careful and deliberate, and it was not a lazy replacement, but I did use AI somewhat in writing the book. And it was published in February. That same month, I went to a conference at Stanford University and actually saw a paper by two of my frequent co-authors, Joel Waldfogel and Imke Reimers. And their paper was looking at what's happened to publishing, particularly on Amazon. And they found that the number of book releases per month has actually tripled since before ChatGPT was released. My book was not in their data, but they then went back and looked at whether these books are written by AI. They took the free samples, they basically scraped the free samples and fed that into an AI detector, and they found that 60% of books released in 2025 were AI written. So that was, I guess, a surprising finding to me, but I thought it was very interesting to see how fast a lot of this is moving. Um, yeah, and then one other thing, I guess I'll mention this. This does not appear in the book, but this is a realization that I sort of had later. My wife is a doctor, she's a psychiatrist. And one thing that I thought of recently is that even if it doesn't hurt employment in the medical profession, it could be enormously disruptive. So if you think about it, if you look at what doctors were selected on, right? They went to school, they took all these tests. They were largely selected on skills that related to diagnosis, to memorization, other things like that. Those are the skills that AI is actually pretty good with. Their doctors use something called open evidence to try and help them. And then if you think about it, if it really helps with that, then you might ask, where does the human add value? Well, there's other traits that you would like in a doctor or a medical professional, like bedside manner or how well they talk to you. But it might be a very different type of person who excels in that role. So you could see it being extremely disruptive to people who are selected on one trait and no longer find themselves as the best positioned for that career.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and taking some questions as well. I think hearing from you only makes people more eager to get started with the book. And I'll be happy to share with you some of the comments that the teachers include in the modules if you're curious how educators
Oh,
uh,
definitely. Yeah.
respond to the book. Um, so we just have a few more things that we need to address before we leave as a group. Yes, please join me in thanking Dr. Shiller for being here with all of us. Just a few other things I want to make sure that you know before we conclude today. Um, there is a direct connection between the things you're going to be reading about in the book and the content that is expected to be included in a high school economics course. I know not everyone participating today is a high school educator, but the majority of you are. And so, no surprise, technology, which is a new standalone standard in the national standards for economics from the Council for Economic Education, will figure heavily, but as well as decision making, that fundamental concept to the discipline, as you heard a little bit today about the incentive filter. And early on in those chapters about in the future of work, we're going to be covering a lot of territory in the standards related to labor markets and earning income. So I say this to assure you that you will find connections between the work you're already doing with students and this book. And by reading the book and hearing how other educators are responding to it, we're confident that it will help you enrich your instruction, have more illustrative examples to share with students, and beyond. So the last thing before we wrap it up is I want to share with you some prompts that I'd like you to think about while you read. And I'll remind you about these in modules 1 and 2. You might jot down some notes to yourself. And in the final module, you'll be asked to weigh in on these questions. So I'll just pause here for a moment so you can scan over those 4 questions. We'll address more than these prompts in the book club, but these are some overarching questions that we'd like you to have in mind as you read. And I look forward um, to hearing what you all have to say in response to these. So, where do we go from here? If you don't have your book yet, that's your top priority. Again, even if you don't get it till next week, you're still going to have plenty of time to read the book and complete the modules, but sooner rather than later. Once you have the book, of course, you're going to start reading. So you're going to read the introduction, foundations, and part 1. Once you've read that portion of the book, and if you get the physical book, that's about 85 pages, then you'll complete module 1. We're going to send you a link to module 1 today, so that you have it. And when you're ready to complete it, because you've read that portion of the book, it'll be available to you in your inbox. And then 2 weeks from today, you will get the link to module 2, which fittingly focuses on part 2 of the book. So that's what you can expect over the next 2 weeks or so. I'll remind you that these are the goals we set out with today. So I hope you're leaving here feeling confident about how the book club works and what's going to be happening over the next several weeks, and an idea of what you will encounter once you open the book and start reading. So I am going to stay on after the meeting to answer questions that anybody might have, but feel free to email me at any time. A question about the book club, a question about a resource that if you're looking for a lesson on a specific topic, really anything economic education related. We exist as an organization to serve teachers. So get in touch with us at any time. We're happy to help you however we can. So, with that, I want to thank all of you for being here. And again, a special thank you to Dr. Shiller for making some time for us. And reach out if you have questions. So, happy reading, everybody. Take care.